Sometimes life has a way of testing even the strongest hearts when they are closest to giving up. Jack Monroe was 58 years old, a man who had once moved through the world like a force of nature, broad shoulders and a frame built to wrestle with. The toughest of cows. Now he felt invisible in the house that had been filled with laughter, a shadow wandering through the quiet halls of his Colorado ranch. The years had carved lines into his face, but grief had etched deeper valleys in his soul. His daughter, Emily, had left for the city years ago, chasing dreams he could not share. His wife, Claire, had quietly packed and gone, leaving the house echoing with empty rooms and unanswered questions. What remained were the fences, the wide fields stretching to the horizon, and a heart that felt more like stone than flesh. Every morning, Jack rose before sunrise, not because of any clock, but because his body remembered the rhythm of life better than his mind remembered hope. He slid into the worn boots that had carried him across countless pastures, pulled on a faded denim jacket, and made his way to the kitchen. The aroma of coffee, bitter and dark, filled the room as he poured a cup, and stared out the window at the rolling acres of grass and fences. Once, this ranch had breathed life herds of cattle moving like rivers of brown and black. Emily's laughter skipping across the fields, dogs running at the heels of horses. Now there was quiet, a quiet that weighed on him like a storm cloud. He could not shake. On the mantel, a small frame held a photograph of Emily in her childhood, laughing as she clutched the reins of a pony. The image seemed to mock him with its brightness, a reminder of days that could not return. Jack did not linger there. Memories too vivid tore open old wounds. He stepped outside, feeling the chill of morning brush against his face, and set about. The work that kept despair at bay, mending broken fences, repairing gates, stacking hay, every chore a small anchor to the life he still had. However hollow it seemed, the town of Silver Creek lay a few miles down the dusty road, a place shrinking. Year by year, shops closed their doors, neighbors moved away, and laughter became something rare and precious. Jack avoided the town, preferring the isolation of his fields, but one Saturday, that choice was interrupted. Mrs. Linda Harper, a neighbor with a knack for persuasion, knocked on his door, dressed for the market and carrying more determination than he had seen in months. "There's an auction in town," she said, before he could protest. "They need someone strong to help move things." Jack opened his mouth to decline, but Linda's eyes gave no room for argument. Within the hour, he found himself among the dusty chairs and long tables behind the Silver Creek Community Hall. People he hadn't spoken to in years milled around, laughing, bargaining, and exchanging news he had not been ready to hear. The auction was part fundraiser, part reunion. A small tether holding the fraying edges of the town together. Jack kept to the back, hoping to remain unnoticed. The early bids were mundane: old lamps, sets of china, rusted tools. For a brief moment, the rhythm of normal life washed over him. Then, two teenagers approached, carrying a wooden crate with holes drilled into the sides. A coarse burlap sack covered the top. The auctioneer, Tom Hendricks, hesitated as he lifted a corner, peeking inside. His voice softened as he spoke, and the murmur that rippled through the crowd was different this time. It was a puppy, small, trembling, and wrapped in shadows beneath the sack, eyes wide and uncertain of the world. The crowd shifted, discomfort in their movements. Tom called for $5. No one raised a hand. He lowered it to $3, then $2. Whispers passed through the room, concerns about vet bills. Someone muttering that the animal was probably abandoned because it was a burden. The crate shivered slightly, and a faint whine escaped from underneath the burlap. Jack felt a pull in his chest he hadn't felt in years. The sound struck a chord deep inside, stirring memories of Emily as a toddler, crying in the night, calling. For comfort, the auctioneer lowered the price again. $1. Silence fell. The crowd had already moved on in their minds. They saw nothing but an obligation. But Jack felt the weight of a worn silver coin in his jacket pocket, a keepsake. From his father, he remembered lessons of compassion, that true strength revealed itself in how one treated those who could not defend themselves. The puppy whimpered again. Jack's chest tightened. The auctioneer called for the bid once, twice. Jack rose, voice gravelly but firm. $1, he said. Heads turned. Relief softened Tom's face as he brought down the gavel. Sold. Jack stepped forward, ignoring the whispers that followed. Too soft-hearted, some said. Doesn't know what he's doing. None of it mattered when he lifted the burlap. Curled in the corner of the crate was the tiniest puppy he had ever seen. Its fur golden but matted, eyes enormous and frightened, body trembling as if it would shatter at any touch. He paid with the silver dollar and carried the crate carefully to his truck. The puppy whimpered once more, softer now. Without thinking, Jack murmured, "It's okay, you're safe." As he drove the long road back to the ranch, the sun rising behind him, Jack felt the first stirrings of something he had not known. In years' hope, a broken cowboy and a scared little dog were heading home together, and neither of them would ever be the same again. The first night proved far more difficult than Jack had anticipated. He set the crate on the kitchen floor near the old cast-iron radiator, hoping the warmth would offer comfort. It did not. The puppy's whines were continuous, thin, and urgent, echoing across the empty house like wind rattling broken shutters. Jack sat at the kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee in front of him, listening, unsure of what to do. Each time he leaned closer, the little dog recoiled, pressing itself tighter into the corner of the crate, eyes wide with fear, limbs trembling violently dot by dawn. Neither had slept. Jack had barely closed his eyes, his mind running in endless circles. The puppy refused food and water, turning away even when Jack offered his hand. He realized with a sinking heart that this was not merely a frightened animal, this was a wounded soul, one that had been cast aside and left to survive. Alone. Late that morning, Mrs. Linda Harper came by with a steaming bowl of soup and concern etched on her face. She crouched beside the crate, shaking her head slowly as she watched the puppy tremble. "Jack, you need help," she said gently. She scribbled a name on a scrap of paper, Dr. Elena Reyes, a veterinarian in Fairview known for her calm manner and steady hands. Jack nodded silently, feeling both relief and trepidation, without a word. He lifted the crate into the back of his old truck and drove the 30 miles to Fairview. The puppy whimpered softly throughout the trip, but Jack kept his eyes on the road. Feeling a strange mix of purpose and anxiety, Dr. Reyes greeted him warmly and ushered them into her clinic. She examined the puppy carefully, her hands gentle and methodical. "He's undernourished but otherwise healthy," she said. "No fractures, no scars from beating, just neglect and fear. He's never been properly cared for, that's all." She paused, studying Jack. "This will take patience, consistent routine, reassurance, time." When Dr. Reyes mentioned that she had treated a dog belonging to a young rancher years ago, Jack felt his chest tighten. Memories flooded in of his late daughter Emily's first dog, a small beagle named Scout, and the laughter that once filled the kitchen. Those times now seemed impossibly distant, yet suddenly alive again. Stirred awake by the trembling little creature at his feet, the drive home was quiet. For the first time in days, the puppy began to settle, curling into itself until the steady hum of the engine lulled it to sleep. Jack watched the rise and fall of its chest, feeling a sensation he hadn't known in years, responsibility. Not the crushing burden of past grief, but a steady, grounding purpose, a shape to a day that had otherwise drifted like smoke. He named the puppy Rusty, a nod to the copper-colored streaks in its fur and to the resilience he hoped it would grow. Into life slowly started to change. Jack established a routine, the same feeding times, the same quiet voice, the same spot on the floor where he would sit while Rusty learned that hands could offer safety rather than harm. Progress was slow. Each day brought small victories. One morning, Rusty nibbled at food while Jack remained nearby. A few days later, he allowed Jack to offer a treat directly from his fingers. Each tiny step felt monumental, proof that trust could be rebuilt from nothing. Afternoons grew warmer, and Jack began receiving visits from a young man named Cole Henderson, Linda's son who had recently returned from service overseas. Cole carried a calm energy, a quiet confidence with animals, that Rusty seemed to recognize instantly. Under Cole's gentle guidance, Rusty learned basic commands: sit, stay, and come. Jack watched from the porch as the dog responded quickly, eyes brightening, tail wagging. It brought a piece Jack hadn't realized he'd been missing. Then one afternoon, a sudden crisis shattered the fragile calm. Linda's granddaughter, a spirited 7-year-old named Lily, wandered too close to the creek running along the northern edge of the ranch. The spring runoff had swollen the water, sending it racing over the banks with a merciless current. Before anyone could react, Lily was swept away, her shrieks lost amid the roar of rushing water. Rusty, small and trembling only moments before, reacted instantly. Without hesitation, he bounded into the torrent, his teeth gripping the sleeve of Lily's jacket. He paddled furiously, dragging her toward the bank until Jack and Cole could reach them both. By the time Lily was safe, Rusty was soaked, exhausted but triumphant. The town talked of it for weeks. The puppy bought for a single dollar had saved a child's life. In the days that followed, Rusty's energy and curiosity grew. One morning, while exploring the northern fence line, he began digging at the base of a large oak. Jack assumed it was mere canine instinct, another animal burrow. But soon, metal glinted from beneath the dirt. Together, Jack and Cole unearthed a buried metal case, weathered but intact. Inside were maps, documents, and surveying equipment clearly left behind in secrecy. Cole's eyes widened. "Someone's been studying this land," he murmured. The pieces fell into place quickly. Developers had been circling Silver Creek, seeking more than just plots for homes. They wanted the minerals beneath, the wealth hidden under the very land Jack had inherited. Dr. Reyes later revealed a startling connection. Rusty had originally belonged to a young engineer working on those surveys. The dog had been deemed a liability and abandoned when the engineer refused to comply with the developer's orders. Suddenly everything made sense. The puppy was no random abandoned animal. He was a guardian, a link to the hidden truth that had threatened to be buried along with the surveys. That evening, Jack sat at his kitchen table, Rusty curled at his feet, staring at the maps and documents laid before him. For the first time since Emily had left, he felt anger rise stronger. Then grief. He was done fading into the background. The broken cowboy who had bought a trembling dog for $1 was gone. In his place stood a man ready to fight not only for his land but for the people, history, and dignity of Silver Creek, the real. Battle began quietly around the kitchen table. Coffee cups grew cold as Jack, Cole, and Linda pored over the maps. Phone calls were made to neighbors, each conversation a quiet rallying cry. Rusty lay beside Jack, calm and watchful, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. Word spread fast. Once the townspeople learned of the developer's secret plans, curiosity turned to outrage. Ranchers who had considered selling began asking questions. Elders who had stayed silent for decades found their voices again. The town council convened an emergency meeting. The community center filled beyond capacity for the first time in years. The developers arrived confident, well-dressed, armed with presentations of progress and opportunity. Pictures of neat subdivisions and paved roads were flashed on the projector. But when Jack stood, maps and documents in hand, the room shifted. His voice, shaky at first, steadied as he spoke of land passed down through generations, promises to children, and the threat of outsiders attempting to claim what was not theirs. Cole spoke beside him, delivering facts clearly and succinctly, leaving no room for deception. Linda presented her evidence, highlighting the history of the surveys and the engineer who had abandoned Rusty rather than betray the truth. Questions flew from the audience. The developer's confident words faltered. The weight of evidence and community resolve was heavier than any glossy presentation. By the evening's end, the council voted unanimously to halt development until a full investigation could be completed. The story spread beyond Silver Creek. Journalists picked up the tale. State headlines celebrating the unlikely heroics of a $1 puppy and a giant cowboy who refused to give up. Pressure mounted, and within weeks, the courts intervened. The developers' surveys were declared illegal, the mineral rights confirmed to belong to Jack and neighboring landowners. Heavy fines were imposed, plans were canceled, and Silver Creek was preserved. In the weeks that followed, the victory extended beyond the legal. Jack paid off long-standing debts, repaired fences, and invested in sustainable improvements to the ranch. A community fund was established to support families in need. Cole started a program training veterans in ranch work, giving them purpose and a renewed sense of belonging. Jack found himself laughing again. Working alongside neighbors he hadn't spoken to in years, Rusty grew alongside the ranch, strong, confident, and loyal. He worked the pastures alongside Jack every morning, watched over the property at night, and became a trusted companion to children and adults alike. No longer a trembling, frightened puppy, he was a cornerstone of life on the ranch, a symbol of resilience, loyalty, and the small miracles that could reshape a broken world. Months later, at another community auction, Jack stood at the back of the room, Rusty at his side. A young puppy was brought forward, timid and uncertain, but without fear or concealment. Bidding began, strong and competitive, until Jack noticed a young ranch hand, hesitant and nervous, unable to compete. Jack raised his hand, winning the bid, and then turned to hand the leash to the young man. "Everyone deserves a chance," he said quietly. As the sun set over the Colorado plains that evening, Jack sat on the porch with Rusty at his feet, the wind carrying the scent of the grass and the warmth of home. The land was quiet, whole, and alive once more. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer ruled him. Sometimes salvation comes not in grand gestures, but wrapped in fur, trembling and forgotten, guiding those who have almost lost their way back to life. The settlement and legal victories secured the ranch for the future. Jack paid off long-standing debts, repaired weathered fences, and invested back into the land instead of selling it. A community fund was established to support local families, struggling to stay afloat, providing stability in a town that had long faced uncertainty. Cole started a program training veterans to work on ranches, giving them purpose and a sense of belonging they had thought lost. The people of Silver Creek began to find their strength again. Claire stayed, not because everything had returned to the way it had been, but because the challenges they had faced had made them stronger together. She and Jack learned to talk openly, again discussing Emily, regrets, and the future with a new sense of honesty and patience. Healing came slowly, measured in small conversations, shared meals, and quiet evenings on the porch. Rusty had grown into a strong, steady dog, loyal and dependable. Each morning he helped Jack with the cattle, moving alongside him across the pastures, and each night he patrolled the fences, keeping watch over the land. Children learned to trust him, adults admired him, and the small trembling puppy that had once hidden in a burlap sack was gone. Rusty had become part of the ranch, part of the family, a symbol of resilience and hope. Months later, at another community auction, Jack stood near the back of the hall with Rusty at his side. A young puppy was brought out, alert, uncertain, but unafraid, not hidden or abandoned. The bidding started strong, yet Jack noticed a young ranch hand standing quietly, hands in pockets, hesitant to compete. Jack raised his hand, won the bid, and then handed the leash to the young man. "Everyone deserves a chance," he said simply, letting the words carry the weight of his own experience. That evening, as the sun sank behind the Colorado plains, Jack sat on his porch with Rusty at his feet and Claire beside him. The land was calm, whole, and full of life again. The ache of past losses still lingered, a quiet reminder of what had been endured, but it no longer ruled him. The lessons of patience, kindness, and resilience had reshaped both Jack and the little dog who had led him back to hope. Sometimes salvation arrives not in grand gestures or dramatic moments. Sometimes it comes quietly, wrapped in fur and fear, trembling and unnoticed, yet powerful enough to heal a broken heart. Rusty had done just that, changed a life, restored a home, and reminded a man that even the smallest acts of care can shift the course of everything. The ranch, the town, and the hearts within it were whole again, and for Jack, the future finally felt like something he could hold on to.